Well, hey everyone, Wayne Fox here, and recently TerraMaster asked if I would like to test and make a video on a new offering that they have. This is the D1 SSD Pro. If you're seeing this video, that means it's after the 20th of January, which is their formal announcement date. I agreed to make the video if they sent me one, and I'd give it a good test. Other than that, I have no obligation. I'll give it my fair and honest assessment. A lot of these devices perform very similarly, so sometimes it comes down to other things, form factor, ability to cool, whether it has a fan, compatibility with other protocols. This seems to check all those boxes. So let's get this box open. We'll see what it looks like, see what its features are, what it offers that maybe the others don't, and put it through its paces and just see how it compares to other devices. We're going to compare it directly to the Acasis TB501, which is one of the better devices I've found so far as build quality and performance. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get this open. Nice black packaging, user manual in a little pouch. It looks like it does come with a case, and there's something in here. Oh, a little screwdriver. Let's go ahead and take a look at it here. And a little cable in here with it. Cable is labeled. It's where is it? Right there. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see this or not. This is a USB 4 version 2 cable, so it's 80 gigabit per second bandwidth, and it says it's 240 watts. Good USB cables now have both of those numbers on them. Let's go ahead and open this up here. Oh, that's a really pretty aluminum color. Those are some serious fins. It's a little bulky though. Let's compare this to an Acasis, for example. This is the Acasis 501, and as you can see, it's quite a bit bigger, if that's important. Now the advantage here is this will not need a fan. They're depending on this aluminum design with these fins to take care of the heat, whereas the Acasis has a fan. Not very loud, but you might hear it. It might be a little bit of a problem. But if absolute quiet is what you need, then a fanless device like this would be a nice option, even if it is a little bulkier. Well, this is a really nice device. I've actually been using it for a couple weeks now. But I think that it does check a lot of boxes. I mentioned it. Let's just real quick summarize some of the features. Fully Thunderbolt 5 compatible, 80 gigabit per second device. That means we should be seeing speeds, write speeds in the neighborhood of 6,000 or better. Read speeds also in the neighborhood of 6,000 or better compared to any of the other devices out there. It's also USB 3.2 compatible, which is nice. Some of them aren't. And one feature that I found interesting is the little LED status light here will glow orange if you're connected to USB 3.2, which will give you about 900 megabytes a second is my guess. And it's white if you're connected to Thunderbolt. I assume that's 3, 4, or 5, fully compatible with all those, which means it's also compatible with USB 4 version 1 and USB 4 version 2. At this point, USB 4 version 2 and Thunderbolt are pretty much the same thing. I don't know. The only difference really is that a device not certified by Intel can't be called a Thunderbolt device, but it is USB 4.2 and of course is Thunderbolt compatible. Might even be using a Thunderbolt controller chip. They just haven't bothered letting Intel certify it, which I assume costs some money, takes time. Some of the companies aren't even bothering doing that anymore. A couple of their features they mentioned, there is some protection circuitry built in to protect against short circuits. It comes with a really nice case. The case is quite sturdy, very protective, as well as a nice short cable. When you're traveling, a short cable is actually really nice to have. A lot of these come with a 2-foot cable, and this is about a 12-inch cable, pretty handy. One other feature, if you happen to be on Windows, you do get a copy of TPC Backer Upper, which is their backup software, which could be useful to some. Anyway, it looks like a really great device. I like the design. I really like the quiet feature of it. There are some circumstances, such as doing video, where the more quiet the room, the better off you are. I've got a pretty sensitive mic here. I use a boom mic instead of a
lapel mic, and it picks up a lot of sound because it's actually a few feet away from me. So the quiet features are very useful, very important for some. Okay, let's get an SSD in this thing and just see how well it performs.
Let's go ahead and open it up. It looks to me like there's one screw is all right there to open it, which is nice. It's fairly simple. Let's just check it out. You know, I got to put some glasses on. My other camera is on the fritz, so I'm actually going to have to record the other part of the video in a day or two when I get it done. Well, that's nice. So you notice that the screw doesn't fall out. So the screw is trapped. You don't have to worry about getting it in there. That's really nice. Looks like it's a fairly straightforward board. It does have a screw to hold the SSD in, which personally I kind of like that. It does have a thermal pad here. So if this isn't thick enough for your particular SSD, then you'd have to replace it with a thicker one. I don't know if it's thick enough. I know a lot of the SSD enclosures, they're not thick enough. With these new, this is a Samsung 990, ultra thin, and a lot of times you cannot make contact with the case and the thermal pad that's included, and you have to put a thicker one in. We'll see if this one needs that or not. Let's go ahead and put this SSD in there. It should be pretty straightforward. Just take the screw out, and we just put that in at about a 30-degree angle. It should slide in really easily. Once it's locked down, we can push it down. Notice there's a ridge there, so you can tell very easily if it's in position or not. And what I always do is I balance the screw on top of my screwdriver, and then I go sideways instead of trying to turn it over. A little shaky. There we go. And make sure that's seated. It stayed in. Good. Not bad. Now it's got a little piece of plastic covering up that heat tape there. Let's take that off. And we'll put this on. It'll be pretty easy to tell if we're making contact or not because that SSD will get kind of hot. And after a day or two, I'll open this back up, and if we're getting contact, we should get an impression of this controller chip right here. And that's the one we really need to transfer the heat from, controller chip. These are going to run hot. In fact, you need them to run hot. That the controller chip is what can get too hot and slow the thing down. Has a couple little notches and a couple little places where it's kind of keyed, so slide it together. And then I think the screw, will just screw it back together. Very good. Yep, very simple. Gonna snug it pretty tight to try to pull up to that heat pad in there. Has a couple little rubber feet right here, which tells me it's intended to be set like this on its side. Okay, we're all ready to test it. We're going to use the Western Digital 850 Black and the Samsung 990 Pro. We're actually going to run it directly up against the Acasis 501, one of the better built and better SSD enclosures out there, Thunderbolt 5, just to get an idea of if there's any major differences. I don't expect them to be. And of course, this one has a fan. The main test will be the last test, which runs a 400 gigabyte file transfer multiple times to see if the fins actually keep the device as cool as the fan or vice versa. So let's just get started. Let's see how this thing performs. So first, let's test the Samsung 990 Pro. Here you can see that using Blackmagic, I'm getting really similar results, and we're getting nice speeds, 6400 megabytes a second. This is where the Samsung really shines. It gives us this speed. The Western Digital can't quite reach this same speed, but notice both devices are giving us pretty much the same results. Now we're going to run Amorphous, and this is just the end of the test. And you can see here, again, also we're getting very, very similar results, almost identical. Both devices are delivering very similar speeds. Amorphous, I think, is testing different types of protocols, from large file transfers down to lots and lots of small file transfers. I read an article about how it actually works once. It's a much more thorough test and gives you a much better idea of real-world speeds. The bottom line is when we're down to those slower speeds that look really slow, we're also doing things where the computer is usually doing other things rather than writing to the disk. So let's go ahead and put the Western Digital 850 Black in there and see what we get from that. Now with the Western Digital 850, we don't get quite the top end speed,
But again, both the TerraMaster and the Acasis are delivering very similar results to each other. Both very efficient, both giving us about 6,000 megabytes a second read and write speed. When we get to the amorphous test, you'll see that the Western Digital performed a little better in the Acasis in the write speed, especially in the high-end stuff. Okay, one more test. We're going to actually run this through a dock. These other tests were run straight to the MacBook Pro. It's an M4 Max MacBook Pro. Usually we lose a little speed through a dock. Let's take a look. You can see that we're getting about 6,000 megabytes a second, which is substantially better than I've gotten with a lot of other devices. This is with the Samsung 990, and I've heard it does better through docks than others. I hadn't tested it before, but it looks like it might be true. Once we connect it to two displays, however, you'll notice we do lose a little bit of speed. We're down to about 5,000. That's still faster. Before I would get about right around 4,000, maybe 4,300. So even with two displays, two 4K displays, we're getting better speed. Just to give you a comparison, this is what happens when I use the Blackmagic, the Western Digital through no docks, and you can see I'm only getting about 4,500. Both devices are performing similarly, so this is a result of the SSD that I'm using, not the two SSD enclosures. So the Western Digital doesn't perform quite as well through a dock. Kind of odd. I can't really explain that, but it does seem odd to me. So real quick, let's just take a look at USB 3.2. And as expected, we're getting about 900 megabytes a second. Pretty much the best you'll ever see. It's 1,000 megabytes a second. It's the theoretical limit. I've never seen much over 920. Now it's time to stress test these. We're going to basically copy a 400 gigabyte file multiple times on each SSD in each enclosure and just see how well the enclosure handles the heat. We'll basically run and copy the file over and over until we hit the end of the particular SSD's SLC cache. At that point, they slow down to their native NAND speed, which is typically about 1.5 gigabits a second or 1,500 megabytes a second. And once they do that, they tend to stabilize temperature-wise, so that's kind of what we're watching for. I'm going to format each drive before we do it. We'll compare them on the screen. You'll see that they run pretty much neck and neck as far as speed. Temperature-wise, we'll see if they have any difference, though. Let's just see how it goes. Okay, we'll drop the file in and get started here. Not a lot going on in the beginning. As you can see, we're starting out right around 100 degrees. I've got the screen set up so you can kind of see that. The top gives us an idea of the speed, and the main reason we're watching that is to see when we hit the end of that SLC cache. And then the bottom, of course, we can monitor the temperature of the device. Let's just fast forward till we get to the end of that SLC cache. Right now we're running about the same temperature, a little hotter on the TerraMaster, but I think it's all kind of irrelevant. And there we dropped it in a second time, and now we're past the end of the SLC cache. And at this point, the Samsung's running about 113 in the TerraMaster and about 111. Let's go ahead and let it finish out now. And you can see it's running much slower. The screen looks like it's running faster now, but it just dynamically resizes. As you can see, we're running about 1,500 megabytes a second in both devices. And as you can see, we're at about 120 in the TerraMaster and about 122 in the Acasis. So despite having no fan, the TerraMaster was more than capable to keep the heat controlled in that SSD. Now, one thing I did do, even though the thermal tape pad does seem to stick to those, I actually was able to get an impression when I opened that up. I went ahead and replaced that with one of these from a company called, they're called Glid or Gelid, or it's a French word apparently. But these are one of the better thermal pads that I've seen, and I buy them from 1 to 2.5 millimeter. And I went ahead and put a 1.5 millimeter pad in this, removed the one that was in there, including the adhesive right down to the aluminum, just to give it its best shot, because I definitely know these are going to handle the heat really well. I don't think you need to do that. I do think the original thermal tape will run fine, unless you're going to really, really push it. Then you might think about it. Anyway, let's just see how it does in the Western Digital. It will push it a little further because it has a much larger, much more dynamic SLC cache. We're going to be able to run over 1,200 gigabytes, 1.2 terabytes of data, which is twice the Samsung before we hit the end of that cache. Let's see how that goes. So again, we'll drop it in. And as you can see, we're starting a little cooler in the TerraMaster. For some reason, it took longer for that Acasis to format that SSD, and so it warmed it up a little, but they'll even out pretty quick. Let's just jump and fast forward this thing. There's the second drop. Here's our third drop, so we're at over 800 gigabytes now. And temperature-wise, we're doing really amazing. In the TerraMaster, we're only at 109 degrees compared to 122 in that of cases. That's after, we're at about 1 terabyte of data at this point. And now we've hit the end of that SLC cache. This is the fourth time, so we're past 1200. We're going to go ahead and let this run. So this is going to be a full 1600 gigabyte data transfer. And let's just see where we end up. And finally at the end, we can see they ran about the same speed, but look at the difference. We were only 127 degrees in the TerraMaster, well below the 135 degrees that's recommended. And in the cases, we're at 142 degrees. So terrific device. I really, really like it. Really well made, very, very attractive, solidly built. I mean, you can tell this thing is built well. TerraMaster has been around quite a while. I think it was over a decade ago I bought my first TerraMaster device. A great reputation for a lot of different storage devices, and this is no exception to their great engineering and their beautiful design. Despite the fact that it has no fan, it was able to control the heat of that Western Digital better than the cases did with a fan. Now, I don't want to knock the cases because that's pushing an SSD really, really hard. And even at 142 degrees, I know a lot of people say, wow, that's way too hot and you're going to thermal throttle. There's a lot of misinformation about thermal throttling, and a lot of the testers are mistaking thermal throttling for the end of the SLC cache, and that's why it slows down. I've actually run this Western Digital with the cover off, monitoring the temperature over 164 degrees with no slowdown, writing at 5,500 megabytes a second. The heat didn't slow it down. I don't know how hot it has to get before it actually thermal throttles, but I think most people mistake hitting the SLC cache limit where it slows way down as thermal throttling. So they're both are great devices, but this truly is a remarkable device, especially if you don't want a fan, you want absolute quiet, beautiful sitting next to your computer. A little bulkier to travel with, but it's not overly bulky, and I took it in my backpack, no problem. It is a little heavier. I don't know, about 7 or 8 ounces heavier, I believe. Not significant, I don't believe. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you find it useful. This is a great device, and I do have a link down below. Jump over to Amazon and grab one of these if you want. I think they're going to really be a great asset for a lot of people. If you have any questions, drop me a comment below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See ya.